on button. You'd think I'd learn this stuff eventually, but Robert Fay, DigiKey Electronics. I'm also a VEX IQ coach in Thief River Falls. I started 8 years ago as a VEX U competitor, and then they actually had an engineering program at my local school that got cut, and I stepped in, asked how I could do something, and they're like, it's up to you. So I bought some VEX IQ kits, got rolling. I have students from kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade that have been in my camps and competition programs. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about just getting started building. I'll talk a little bit about the competition, but I do a lot of basic camps that don't focus on the games, and just want to talk a little bit about how I get started. And one of the biggest resources that's on vexrobotics.com. If we want to switch to my computer page, I'll show vexrobotics.com, and they have a lot of build instructions. They have them for IQ, Go, a lot of different things. So I have up here a list of the different robots that they have instructions, and they have basic robots for the second generation. You have here, as you scroll down, they also have the hero bots. Now these are kind of a basic robot to play the competition games. It's a great starting point. If you're just getting into competition, robots will be able to score points in the game. They likely won't win any competitions, do great, but it's supposed to be a starting point for the students to be able to get in, understand a little bit about how the game works, how some of the pieces work with VEX, and kind of get them started. If you do have the older kits, which is the first generation kits, there are also builds for those. A lot of these you see are old competitions, as well as just some kind of fun things. You see VREX on here, Alley on here. Those are kind of some fun builds. I actually did a dinosaur camp this year where students got to choose which one of those they wanted to do. And then also some basic Clawbot and Autopilot. Clawbot is kind of a universal robot. They have some cubes you can get from VEX IQ that those will pick up and manipulate. Autopilot gives you a standard build where you can use some of the sensors. You'll also find on this your field build instructions. So you do get into the games. The new ones, you don't get manuals with your kits, so you have to build those offline. I also, for my students, if you can flip off there, they do have that. I also print off paper copies. I don't always have enough computers for all of my students. I'm lucky enough I have a lot of kits that I'm able to take around to the different camp locations. I don't always have enough computers or Wi-Fi at all the locations I do robotics, so I also print off these where the students can go through step by step, same as the builds online, to build their base robots. So that is a big starting point for me, especially if you start young. So I start students in 2nd and 3rd grade building. Most of them come in, how do I do this? And the first thing we have to cover is how do the pieces go together? How do gears go together? And a lot of the builds will cover the basics of how the pieces connect and go together. And they're step by step, calls out part numbers, as well as a lot of them you can actually size when you print them, or if you size to 100% on your screen, the parts will actually lay out right on your screen, so they're able to build these robots. The second step for me is always kind of going on to what can we do with this robot. The base robots don't do a lot as far as physically being able to manipulate like game objects, different things you have in the classroom or at your camp location. So we look at how can we change, and this gets into some of that creative thinking and what challenges the students a lot. And that's taking this base robot, and I have a couple examples here on the table that my students actually built the base Clawbot. And I don't have a base Clawbot with me because I didn't have any left that were together. But you'll see I have two versions here that the base of the robot is very similar between these, but the students actually started building their own claws. So this one they just added on, and they were able to make a change that would go and grab one of the green cubes for this year's game. And that worked out fairly well. The students were able to score a few points playing the game, but it couldn't quite get the bigger cubes do some of the things that they wanted to. So another version of that they built was a little different claw that opened up. So got a couple game objects here. And so with this, the students were actually able to build that versus the smaller one couldn't do that. So the instructions are a really good place to start, just like the hero bots, and then they can build off of that. And I found that's a really good place to start. And every year, the VEX Robotics is adding to the list of base bots that's on their website. And I have a couple examples. You know, I have VREX up here. This is actually a base bot with full instructions. I did a summer camp this year where students were able to create that. And it really challenged them because they had to learn how to get all of the pieces to interact. And they also saw different ways to move things. It's a little hard to show on camera, but for those that are here, they can come up and look at it. It's kind of impressive, especially for the students. This will walk, his arms will move, they're actually moving with rubber bands, as well as his mouth. His tail moves, and it's all being done with one motor. So as he walks, all of those other things are moving. And so for the kids to see how those things are activated and how they move without having a motor hooked right up to them, it gets them to think a lot when they actually move on to the next challenge of, we're going to build a robot to play this game, to do this competition, and how are different ways that I can use my 6 motor limit to accomplish different tasks. So it was really interesting to watch them build that and understand, hey, how does this mouth move, but I don't actually have a motor hooked up to that. And they start seeing some of those connections. One of my other robots that I have here, there are no plans for this. This was actually a BattleBots camp that I did. But for those of you that did a competition last year with IQ, you'll notice the purple spinners. The student actually took 2 of those, put them together to make a spinning wheel for that robot. So they were taking planned pieces from that field build, and they used the gearing and everything that was built in that to build another robot. So it's another example of how somebody took this initial idea and was able to improve on it. And then one other slide I'll share here. This is another thing. I actually keep a poster of this up in my robotics room at all time. It's kind of talking that engineering process. So we go through this a lot, and we talk about, you know, asking the question. So whether this is how can I improve this robot? Or if it's day one of your competition team, talking about how do we score points? How many points can we score? What's our goal for the season to do? We talk about that. We imagine this idea, okay, how can we do this? You know, and we talk about things, one of my teams last year, they were building a robot that would scoop up these discs, and they actually put a picture of a combine in their engineering notebook, because they're like, oh, I saw this combine out in the field, and it had a rotation thing in the front that picked up wheat. And so they use that as inspiration. So they start getting these ideas, they start imagining, and you know, especially when you're dealing with younger kids, like I said, I start competition as young as 2nd grade. Some of the ideas and things they think about, the toys they play with, they bring that in and they're like, hey, how does this work? And can I take this and incorporate it into my VEX robot? So we do a lot of imagining before we start planning. Planning is always a little hard, especially with the younger students. Sometimes the drawings, they take a lot to explain what's happening. So it's really fun to take this idea they're talking about, watch them make that plan, and then to create things. And once they create things, then going back and saying, hey, did this work like you wanted to, or can we improve it? And then you can see that just loops back to we're asking that question again. So I really like to use that, and you know, that's what you see here kind of process through is we got the Clawbot. The Claw didn't quite work for our game, improved it a little bit. That only worked on that one little green cube, so they improved it a little bit more, and they're kind of stepping through that. So it's a very general overlook, but I just wanted to kind of share a little bit of that process, and especially those tools, those base build instructions that are available on vexrobotics.com. Whether you're teaching just the engineering concepts, the robotics concepts, using some of those base bots, or if you're jumping into the game and you're looking at building that hero bot. They're both great resources to start, and then using that to kind of ask those questions and get into that engineering process of how does that work? Can we improve it? And going through and creating and going through that loop over and over again. So, are there any questions?
Nope, no questions, but hey, thank you, Robert, much appreciated. I agree 100% with your strategy. You know, here's some build instructions, let's get them started. They can see how some of the pieces and parts fit together, how the system is meant to be built with, and then go from there. You got to start somewhere. So that looks like a fantastic place to be.
Yeah, it's you know, I find it always amazing. I've seen some of these students come in 2nd, 3rd grade. They have to have instructions to put anything together. And then I'm lucky now I've had kids 6 years. I've seen that 2nd grader go to 8th grade. And by that time, they give me the game manual and leave me alone. And you know, you're there just because the school requires you to be in the building. And it's really great to watch that process. But the resources of having those base builds, I think are really important to start, especially if you're jumping in day one brand new.
All right, thank you much. We're going to reset for our next segment. Thanks, Robert.